What is some of the work that you do that doesn't just deal with the byproduct of, that doesn't just deal with gun violence and goes, deeper into the gradient?
I think it's just, this is such a simple thing, but it's just having that conversation, right? Like, just stop shutting down immediately. On our Facebook posts, we usually get people who just comment the same thing, and we usually don't respond, but one person mentioned literally gangbanger, and I was like, oh my God, just was not the day to bring it up to me. And and I mentioned the 68% suicide rate, and had mentioned that I have a history of suicide, and there was a connection there, right? Because he had the same, and he said it on Facebook, so I can say it, but that same connection. Yeah. So there's something there. We may not agree on everything, and I'm pretty sure we won't, but to have those conversations and to not. When I first started and I said I was a gun owner, there was a huge backlash from people that were supposed to be allies in this movement, right? Yeah. And it was that moment of to what end? Yeah. Right? I get her perspective, and I get why, and I get all of that, but the reality is we all have different experiences, and we need to figure out a way, because we can keep having these fights, but people are dying, kids are dying. Yeah. And there's a book called Children Under Fire, and I forgot the author, he's a Washington Post reporter, and talks about the actual trauma that kids are going through because they do active shooter drills. He went into a community and all the kids had their back against the wall, and they didn't know why they were doing it. And he asked, he was a psychologist, was like, why are you guys all doing this? They didn't notice, and they didn't know why. And it's like, do we understand as a community what we're doing to our kids? Yeah. Right? Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's it. And along with that, I would also add that everyone across the state is affected by gun violence. Absolutely. And so we just really have to understand the ways in which something that happens in North Minneapolis might affect somewhere in rural Minnesota, with where our taxes are going, with how much money has to be funneled into intervention. And so again, just going at those root causes, how are the businesses impacted? There's been a lot of gunfire in downtown Minneapolis, and that has definitely impacted the businesses, which is impacting the amount of money that the city is bringing in. Yeah. There's so many different ways that people are affected, and institutions are impacted by gun violence, and I don't think that we're always thinking of it from the frame of how am I personally impacted, or how is my business impacted. And so I think people just need to, if they're really interested, do a little bit of that work. But I would also say that they're back to the Mothers Against Community Gun Violence, a Mother's Love initiative. There are a lot of initiatives. Minnesota Teen Activists. Yeah, Minnesota Teen Activists, Youth Undoing Institutional Racism. There's so many organizations to call out that do need volunteers, that do need donations, that do need hands on deck to help them carry out their missions in reducing violence in our communities. And so I would say just try to tap into where those people are and what help is needed, and just knowing that that extra hand and that extra body is often wanted and needed and really appreciated in this fight.
And I think too, just social media, right? Sharing their posts goes a long way. And the teen activists do an amazing job with that. And they're just amazing people, I just have to say that. But just spreading that word, again, it goes back to changing the narrative, right? I think the narrative's oh, no one's doing anything in North Minneapolis, they're just killing each other. But no, there's actually groups doing the work. You just don't know, right? Yeah. And so just sharing that message, to me, that's what I feel like that initial first step is, those conversations and changing the narrative and just looking at what statistics show us.